Introduction. Hey everyone, glad to see you again. Let's get started. What does it truly mean to lead? Is leadership merely a title printed on a business card, or is it a deeper force that shapes decisions, influences people, and defines direction in moments of uncertainty? In a world obsessed with authority and position, the essence of leadership is often misunderstood. Yet history and everyday experience reveal a powerful truth. Leadership is not about titles. It is about action. True leadership appears not in loud commands, but in deliberate choices. Moral courage and the willingness to stand accountable when outcomes are uncertain. Consider moments of crisis when rules fail, systems shake, and fear spreads. In such moments, people do not look for the person with the highest rank. They look for the person with clarity, confidence, and conviction. Leadership, therefore, is not granted by position, but earned through behavior. It exists wherever responsibility is accepted and vision is translated into action. Leadership is not an inherited privilege or a formal designation. It is a practiced discipline shaped by values, decisions, and consistency over time. Every individual possesses the potential to lead, yet only those who cultivate awareness, responsibility, and purpose rise to that role. The central argument of this essay is clear. Leadership is the ability to influence and inspire through clarity, integrity, and responsibility, not authority. A true leader does not command obedience. A true leader earns trust. In modern society, leadership extends far beyond corporate offices and political institutions. It is present in classrooms, families, communities, and personal choices. Wherever people seek direction, meaning, or stability, leadership becomes essential. Strong leadership creates alignment and progress, while weak leadership breeds confusion and stagnation. For this reason, understanding leadership is not optional. For those who wish to create impact, it is fundamental. This essay explores leadership as a combination of inner strength and outward action. It examines how vision provides direction, how character builds credibility, and how responsibility transforms influence into lasting impact. Each section reinforces the idea that leadership is not defined by words, but by consistent behavior under pressure. Leadership demands courage, clarity, and commitment, especially when decisions are difficult and outcomes are uncertain. Ultimately, this discussion is not intended merely to define leadership, but to challenge the reader. It asks a vital question. How do our daily choices reflect the kind of leader we aspire to become? Because leadership does not begin on a stage or in an office. It begins in mindset, intention, and action. And it is through these elements that ordinary individuals create extraordinary change. And hold TBD. Subscribe to our channel, eat a like, share it with friends, and leave a comment. Don't forget to hit the bell icon for all updates. Chapter 1. Understanding the essence of leadership. Leadership is often spoken about, admired, and demanded, yet rarely understood in its true depth. Many people associate leadership with authority, hierarchy, or control, assuming that those who occupy the highest positions naturally qualify as leaders. In reality, leadership is not a privilege granted by rank. It is a responsibility earned through action. At its core, leadership is the capacity to influence direction, shape behavior, and inspire commitment, especially when conditions are uncertain and outcomes are unclear. The essence of leadership begins with influence rather than power. Power can compel compliance, but influence inspires willingness. When people follow instructions merely because they are forced to, performance remains shallow and temporary. However, when individuals believe in a leader's vision and trust their judgment, commitment becomes deeper and more enduring. This distinction explains why some leaders leave lasting legacies while others fade as soon as their authority ends. Leadership that relies on influence builds momentum. Leadership that relies on fear eventually collapses. A defining characteristic of effective leadership is clarity. Leaders must first understand themselves before they can guide others. Without clarity of purpose, decisions become reactive, inconsistent, and confusing. A leader who lacks direction creates uncertainty within the group, weakening morale and productivity. Conversely, when leaders communicate a clear purpose, They provide a stable reference point that aligns effort and reduces doubt. Clarity transforms complexity into focus and allows people to move forward with confidence. Closely connected to clarity is vision, the ability to see beyond immediate circumstances and imagine a better future. Vision does not ignore present challenges. Rather, it places them within a broader context. Leaders with vision help others understand not only what must be done, but why it matters. This sense of meaning is critical, because people are more motivated by purpose than by instruction. When vision is communicated effectively, it turns routine tasks into contributions toward a shared goal. However, leadership is not sustained by vision alone. Character forms the foundation upon which all leadership stands. Integrity, honesty, and consistency are not optional traits. They are essential. People observe leaders closely, often more attentively than leaders realize. When words and actions align, trust is built. When they conflict, credibility erodes. Trust, once broken, is difficult to restore, and without trust, leadership loses its effectiveness. Thus, character is not separate from leadership, it is leadership. Responsibility is another defining element of true leadership. Leaders do not distance themselves from failure, nor take exclusive credit for success. Instead, they accept accountability for outcomes and recognize the contributions of others. This sense of ownership strengthens trust and encourages collective effort. When leaders accept responsibility, they signal reliability and courage. Such behavior creates a culture in which people feel safe to contribute, innovate, and learn from mistakes. Leadership also requires emotional intelligence, the ability to understand and manage emotions, both one's own and those of others. Rational decision-making alone is insufficient in environments shaped by human relationships. Leaders who lack emotional awareness often misinterpret situations, respond defensively, or create unnecessary conflict. In contrast, emotionally intelligent leaders listen actively, respond thoughtfully, and adapt their approach to different individuals and contexts. This sensitivity strengthens communication and reinforces mutual respect. An often overlooked aspect of leadership is self-leadership. Before influencing others, individuals must demonstrate discipline, accountability, and self-control in their own actions. Self-leadership involves managing habits, emotions, and priorities with intention. Leaders who fail to lead themselves struggle to maintain credibility, as inconsistency undermines their message. In contrast, leaders who embody the standards they expect from others naturally inspire imitation. Leadership, therefore, begins internally before it manifests externally. Another critical dimension of leadership is decision-making under uncertainty. Leaders are frequently required to make choices without complete information or guaranteed outcomes. Avoiding decisions may feel safe, but indecision often causes greater harm than imperfect action. Effective leaders evaluate available information, consider consequences, and act with resolve. They remain flexible, adjusting course when necessary, but they do not allow fear to paralyze progress. Courage in decision-making distinguishes leaders from observers. Leadership is also deeply connected to service. Contrary to popular belief, leadership is not about being served, but about serving others. By prioritizing the growth, well-being, and success of their teams, leaders create environments where people feel valued and empowered. This approach does not weaken authority. It strengthens loyalty and engagement. Service-oriented leadership shifts focus from personal gain to collective advancement, resulting in sustainable success. In contrast, weak leadership often manifests through inconsistency, avoidance of responsibility, and lack of empathy. Such leadership breeds confusion, disengagement, and mistrust. When leaders fail to communicate clearly or act ethically, systems deteriorate and morale declines. Over time, the absence of strong leadership leads to stagnation, as individuals lose confidence in direction and purpose. This contrast highlights why leadership quality directly affects outcomes at every level of society. Importantly, leadership is not limited to extraordinary individuals or dramatic moments. It appears in everyday choices: speaking honestly, supporting others, taking initiative, and standing firm in values. These actions may seem small, but their cumulative effect shapes culture and direction. Leadership, therefore, is accessible to anyone willing to accept responsibility and act with intention. It is not reserved for the few. It is cultivated by the committed. As this chapter has shown, leadership is a multi-dimensional concept rooted in influence, clarity, character, responsibility, and service. These elements are interconnected and mutually reinforcing. Remove one, and leadership weakens. Strengthen them, and leadership endures. Understanding the essence of leadership is the first step toward practicing it effectively. Ultimately, leadership is not defined by how loudly one speaks or how many people follow, but by the quality of decisions made and the impact those decisions create. It is revealed in moments of pressure, tested by adversity, and proven through consistency over time. By understanding leadership in its true form, individuals prepare themselves not merely to lead positions, but to lead lives of purpose, integrity, and impact. Agar ap chen main. Chapter 2, 1500 words. BIC. Exact tone, depth, or continuity kesath lik dun. Chapter 2. Leadership begins from within. Leadership does not start with followers. It starts with the self. Before an individual can guide others, inspire trust, or influence direction, they must first demonstrate the ability to lead their own thoughts, emotions, and actions. This internal foundation, often referred to as self-leadership, is the invisible force behind all effective leadership. Without it, external leadership becomes fragile, inconsistent, and unsustainable. Self-leadership begins with self. A leader must understand their strengths, limitations, values, and motivations. Without this understanding, decisions are driven by ego, impulse, or insecurity rather than purpose. Self-aware leaders recognize how their behavior affects others and adjust accordingly. They do not deny weaknesses. Instead, they acknowledge them and seek growth. This honesty creates internal alignment, which later translates into external credibility. Closely linked to self-awareness is emotional control. Leadership regularly places individuals in high-pressure situations. Failure, criticism, and uncertainty are unavoidable. Leaders who are ruled by their emotions react impulsively, escalate tension, or withdraw from responsibility. In contrast, leaders who manage their emotions respond with clarity and composure. Emotional control does not mean suppressing feelings. It means understanding them and choosing responses deliberately. This ability stabilizes teams and prevents chaos during difficult moments. Discipline is another cornerstone of self-leadership. Motivation may fluctuate, but discipline creates consistency. Leaders cannot rely on inspiration alone. They must cultivate habits that support their vision, whether it is managing time effectively, honoring commitments, or maintaining ethical standards. Disciplined behavior builds trust over time. People may admire talent, but they rely on consistency. Leadership, grounded in discipline, proves dependable, even when circumstances change. Values play a defining role in self. Every decision reflects a set of underlying principles, whether consciously chosen or not. Leaders who fail to clarify their values often compromise under pressure, damaging credibility. In contrast, leaders with clearly defined values use them as a compass for when faced with difficult choices. Values provide stability and direction. This alignment between belief and action strengthens integrity, which is essential for long-term leadership. Another critical element of self-leadership is accountability. Effective leaders do not blame circumstances, systems, or individuals for their failures. Instead, they ask, "What could I have done differently?" This mindset fosters learning rather than defensiveness. Accountability transforms mistakes into lessons and setbacks into opportunities for growth. Leaders who model accountability encourage the same behavior in others, creating a culture of responsibility rather than fear. Self-leadership also requires the ability to manage internal dialogue. The way individuals speak to themselves influences confidence, resilience, and negative self-talk weakens judgment and amplifies doubt, while constructive inner dialogue reinforces clarity and courage. Leaders who cultivate a balanced, realistic mindset are better equipped to face challenges without losing direction. Mental discipline, therefore, is as important as external skill. Moreover, self-leadership demands the willingness to act without immediate recognition. Many leadership decisions go unnoticed, especially at early stages. Those driven solely by praise or validation quickly lose motivation. True leaders act because action aligns with their values, not because applause is guaranteed. This internal motivation sustains effort when progress is slow and results are delayed. The relationship between self-leadership and external influence is direct. People observe consistency before they offer trust. When leaders demonstrate discipline, emotional balance, and ethical behavior, they become examples rather than enforcers. Instructions carry more weight when supported by behavior. As a result, leadership becomes natural rather than forced. Influence grows not through authority, but through alignment between words and actions. In contrast, the absence of self-leadership creates instability. Leaders who lack self-control often shift direction, react defensively, or prioritize personal comfort over responsibility. Such behavior confuses teams and weakens morale. Over time, inconsistency erodes trust, making leadership ineffective regardless of position or title. This contrast highlights why self-leadership is not optional, it is foundational. Self-leadership also shapes resilience. Leadership inevitably involves failure, criticism, and resistance. Without internal strength, these pressures lead to burnout or withdrawal. Leaders who practice self-reflection and maintain perspective recover more quickly from setbacks. They do not define themselves by single outcomes, but by long-term purpose. Resilience allows leaders to remain steady when others lose confidence. Importantly, self-leadership is a continuous process, not a one-time achievement. Growth requires ongoing reflection, learning, and adjustment. As responsibilities expand, leaders must reassess habits, beliefs, and behaviors. This commitment to self-improvement prevents stagnation and keeps leadership relevant. Those who stop growing eventually lose effectiveness, regardless of past success. Self-leadership also prepares individuals to lead ethically. When values, discipline, and accountability are internalized, ethical behavior becomes instinctive rather than forced. Leaders no longer need constant external regulation because their internal standards guide decisions. This internal governance protects leadership from corruption, misuse of power, and short-term thinking. As leadership expands outward from self to team to organization, the quality of internal leadership determines the quality of external impact. Strong systems cannot compensate for weak self. Conversely, individuals with strong self-leadership often create positive change even within flawed systems. This reality emphasizes that leadership development must begin internally before structural authority is pursued. Ultimately, leadership that lacks self-leadership is temporary. It may function under ideal conditions, but it collapses under pressure. In contrast, leadership rooted in self-awareness, discipline, values, and accountability remains stable across challenges. It inspires confidence not because it is perfect, but because it is grounded. This chapter reinforces a critical truth. Leadership is not something one steps into, it is something one becomes. By mastering self-leadership, individuals build the foundation necessary for meaningful influence. Only those who can lead themselves with integrity and consistency are prepared to lead others with purpose and impact. Chapter 3. Vision and Purpose. Giving direction to leadership. Leadership without direction is movement without meaning. While self-leadership builds the inner foundation of a leader, vision and purpose give leadership its outward direction. People do not commit their energy to action unless they understand where they are going and why it matters. Vision transforms leadership from routine management into meaningful guidance, and purpose turns effort into commitment. Vision is the ability to imagine a future that does not yet exist. It is not fantasy or wishful thinking, but a clear and realistic picture of what can be achieved through intentional action. Leaders with vision do more than describe goals. They articulate possibilities. They help others see beyond current limitations and recognize potential where obstacles once seemed dominant. In this way, vision expands perception and creates momentum. Purpose gives vision its meaning, while vision answers the question, where are we going? Purpose answers, why does it matter? Without purpose, vision becomes empty ambition. Leaders who lack purpose often chase short-term success or personal recognition, resulting in shallow outcomes. In contrast, purpose-driven leaders anchor their vision in values and shared benefit. This alignment ensures that progress remains ethical, sustainable, and meaningful. A leader's vision must be clear to be effective. Ambiguous or constantly shifting visions confuse teams and weaken trust. When people are unsure about direction, they hesitate, disengage, or act independently without alignment. Clear vision reduces uncertainty by providing a stable reference point for decision-making. It allows individuals to prioritize tasks, allocate energy, and measure progress with confidence. Communication is the bridge between vision and action. A vision that remains in the leader's mind has no power. Leaders must express vision in language that is understandable, relatable, and inspiring. Effective communication does not rely on complexity. It relies on clarity and consistency. Repeating the vision, connecting it to daily tasks, and reinforcing its relevance ensures that it becomes shared rather than personal. Moreover, vision must be credible. If leaders propose futures that contradict reality or ignore constraints, followers quickly lose confidence. Credible vision acknowledges challenges while offering solutions. It does not deny difficulty. It reframes difficulty as a path toward growth. When leaders balance optimism with realism, they gain trust and encourage perseverance rather than blind enthusiasm. Purpose also plays a critical role in resilience. Challenges, failures, and resistance are inevitable in any meaningful pursuit. When obstacles arise, vision alone may not be enough to sustain effort. Purpose provides endurance by reminding individuals why their work matters. Teams driven by purpose recover faster from setbacks because they see failure as temporary rather than final. The relationship between vision, purpose, and self-leadership is direct. Leaders who lack internal clarity struggle to articulate external direction. Vision begins with reflection, understanding one's values, priorities, and long-term intentions. Without this internal alignment, leaders communicate mixed signals and lose coherence. Purpose, therefore, must first be personal before it becomes collective. Vision also requires adaptability. While purpose remains stable, vision must evolve with changing circumstances. Leaders who cling rigidly to outdated visions risk adaptable leaders reassess direction without abandoning core values. This balance between stability and flexibility allows leadership to remain effective in dynamic environments. Change becomes a strategic adjustment rather than a sign of failure. Another important function of vision is alignment. When vision and purpose are shared, individual efforts converge toward a common goal. This alignment reduces conflict, duplication, and inefficiency. People understand how their roles contribute to the larger picture, increasing motivation and accountability. Alignment transforms groups into cohesive teams and effort into progress. In contrast, leadership without vision creates stagnation. Teams operate on routine rather than intention, responding to problems without shaping outcomes. Over time, this reactive approach drains energy and suppresses innovation. Without purpose, work becomes mechanical and engagement declines. This contrast highlights why vision is not optional, it is essential. Vision-driven leadership also empowers others. When leaders share vision openly, they invite participation rather than control outcomes. Individuals are encouraged to think creatively, take initiative, and solve problems independently. Empowerment strengthens leadership capacity across the organization rather than concentrating it at the top. As a result, leadership becomes distributed rather than dependent. Ethical leadership is closely tied to purpose. Vision without ethical grounding risks exploitation and misuse of influence. History provides countless examples of charismatic leaders whose visions lacked moral responsibility, leading to harm rather than progress. Purpose rooted in values protects leadership from corruption and ensures that success does not come at the expense of integrity. Leaders must also translate vision into measurable goals. Abstract ideas inspire, but concrete objectives guide action. By breaking vision into achievable steps, leaders make progress visible and attainable. This process maintains momentum and allows teams to celebrate progress, reinforcing commitment to the larger purpose. Importantly, vision is not exclusive to large-scale leadership. Individuals lead with vision in classrooms, families, and communities. Whenever someone sets a meaningful direction and encourages others to move toward it, leadership is present. Vision scales with context, but its impact remains significant at every level. As leadership grows more complex, vision becomes increasingly important. External pressures, competing interests, and uncertainty intensify the need for direction. Leaders who lack vision become overwhelmed, while those with clear purpose navigate complexity with confidence. Vision acts as an anchor, preventing distraction and drift. Ultimately, leadership that endures is leadership guided by vision and sustained by purpose. Vision provides direction, purpose provides meaning, and self-leadership provides discipline. Together, these elements transform influence into impact. Without vision, leadership loses direction. Without purpose, it loses meaning. This chapter reinforces a central truth. Leadership is not about managing the present. Alone, it is about shaping the future responsibly. Leaders who articulate clear vision and meaningful purpose do more than guide action. They inspire belief, and belief, once established, becomes the most powerful force in leadership. Chapter 4. Communication and Influence. The voice of leadership. Leadership exists only where influence exists. And influence is impossible without communication. Vision gives leadership direction, self-leadership gives it stability, but communication gives it life. A leader may possess clarity of purpose and strong character, yet without the ability to communicate effectively, that strength remains locked within. Communication is the medium through which leadership moves from intention to impact. At its core, leadership communication is not about speaking more. It is about being understood. Many leaders assume that authority automatically guarantees clarity, but authority does not ensure connection. People do not follow words simply because they are spoken by someone in charge. They follow meaning, relevance, and sincerity. Leadership communication, therefore, must be intentional, precise, and aligned with purpose. Effective communication begins with listening. This may seem counterintuitive in a world that associates leadership with commanding speech, yet listening is the foundation of influence. Leaders who listen, understand concerns, recognize unspoken resistance, and gain insight into collective needs. Listening signals respect, and respect builds trust. Without trust, communication becomes noise rather than guidance. Clarity is the most critical quality of leadership communication. Ambiguous language creates confusion, hesitation, and misalignment. Leaders must translate complex ideas into simple, actionable messages without oversimplifying reality. Clear communication does not avoid difficulty. It organizes it. When people understand expectations, priorities, and reasoning, they act with confidence rather than fear. Tone is as important as content. The same message can inspire or discourage depending on how it is delivered. Leaders who communicate with arrogance or impatience weaken morale, even when their intentions are sound. In contrast, leaders who communicate with calm authority and respect create psychological safety. This safety encourages honest dialogue, innovation, and accountability. Consistency strengthens communication. When leaders change messages frequently or contradict themselves, credibility erodes. People begin to question not only direction but intention. Consistent communication reinforces reliability and reduces uncertainty. Even during change, consistency in values and purpose reassures followers that leadership remains grounded. Nonverbal communication also plays a powerful role in leadership. Body language, facial expressions, and behavior often communicate more than words. Leaders who speak about integrity but act dishonestly send conflicting messages that undermine trust. Influence depends on alignment between verbal and nonverbal signals. When actions reinforce words, communication gains authenticity. Communication is also the primary tool through which leaders shape culture. What leaders emphasize, repeat, and reward becomes normalized over time. Silence communicates priorities, as clearly as speech. If leaders ignore unethical behavior or poor performance, they implicitly endorse it. Thus, leadership communication includes not only what is said, but what is addressed and what is allowed. Influence grows when communication connects vision to individual roles. People are more engaged when they understand how their efforts contribute to larger goals. Leaders must bridge the gap between abstract purpose and daily tasks. By explaining relevance, leaders transform routine work into meaningful contribution. This connection increases motivation and ownership. Conflict is an inevitable part of leadership, and communication determines whether conflict becomes destructive or productive. Avoiding difficult conversations creates tension and resentment, while confronting them poorly escalates division. Effective leaders address conflict directly, respectfully, and constructively. They focus on issues rather than personalities, and seek understanding rather than dominance. Another essential aspect of leadership communication is adaptability. Different individuals respond to different styles. A single approach does not fit all situations. Leaders must adjust language, tone, and method depending on context and audience. This adaptability does not compromise authenticity. It enhances effectiveness. Influence increases when communication meets people where they are. In contrast, poor communication weakens leadership, regardless of vision or intent. Leaders who overcommunicate without substance or undercommunicate during uncertainty create confusion. When information is withheld or distorted, trust deteriorates. Over time, ineffective communication isolates leaders from their teams, reducing influence and engagement. Transparency strengthens leadership communication. While leaders cannot share every detail, openness about reasoning and constraints builds credibility. People are more willing to accept difficult decisions when they understand the logic behind them. Transparency does not eliminate disappointment, but it reduces suspicion and resistance. Communication also plays a central role in leaders must explain not only what decisions are made, but why they are made. This explanation helps others learn how to think, not just what to do. Over time, this shared understanding improves judgment across the organization, reducing dependence on constant direction. Influence is sustained through repetition and reinforcement. Leaders cannot assume that one message is enough. Key ideas must be repeated consistently across different platforms and moments. Repetition does not imply weakness. It ensures alignment. Over time, repeated messages shape shared understanding and behavior. Importantly, leadership communication must remain ethical. Influence can be used to manipulate as easily as it can inspire. Ethical leaders communicate honestly, avoid exaggeration, and respect autonomy. They do not exploit fear or misinformation to gain compliance. Ethical communication preserves dignity and ensures that influence serves collective good rather than personal gain. Leadership communication is also tested during failure. How leaders communicate mistakes determines whether failure becomes a learning opportunity or a source of blame. Leaders who communicate accountability and learning foster resilience. Those who deflect responsibility damage trust. Failure handled well strengthens leadership. Failure handled poorly exposes its weakness. As leadership expands, communication becomes more complex. Larger groups, diverse perspectives, and greater stakes require greater clarity and intent. Leaders must balance consistency with adaptability, authority with empathy, and transparency with discretion. Mastery of communication enables leaders to navigate this complexity without losing direction. Ultimately, communication is not a skill separate from leadership. It is leadership in action. Through communication, leaders share vision, reinforce values, resolve conflict, and build trust. Influence grows not from how much leaders speak, but from how clearly and authentically they connect. This chapter reinforces a fundamental truth. Leadership that cannot communicate cannot endure. Vision without communication fades. Purpose without language remains invisible. And influence without trust disappears. Leaders who master communication give their leadership a voice, one that guides, inspires, and unites. Chapter 5. Building Trust, the Foundation of Leadership. Leadership is impossible without trust. Trust is the invisible currency that determines whether influence translates into action and whether vision becomes reality. A leader may have clarity of purpose, strong self-leadership, and impeccable communication, but without trust. These qualities have little impact. People do not commit fully to someone they doubt, and they do not follow instructions from someone whose integrity is uncertain. Trust is both the foundation and the glue of leadership. The first principle of trust is integrity. Leaders who consistently act in alignment with their words earn credibility. Integrity is demonstrated not only in public actions, but in the private choices that remain unseen. Leaders who cut corners, make excuses, or compromise their values gradually erode trust. Conversely, leaders who honor commitments, admit mistakes, and prioritize honesty cultivate reliability. Integrity is not optional. It is the backbone of all enduring influence. Consistency reinforces integrity. Trust requires predictability in behavior and leaders who frequently change their stance or send conflicting messages create confusion and doubt. Consistent leaders provide a stable environment in which people can make decisions with confidence. Consistency does not mean rigidity. It means alignment of words, actions, and values over time. Through consistency, leaders demonstrate reliability, which fosters long-term loyalty. Transparency strengthens trust by reducing uncertainty. Leaders who share reasoning, intentions, and constraints openly invite followers into understanding. Transparency builds confidence that decisions are not arbitrary and that challenges are acknowledged rather than ignored. While leaders cannot reveal every detail, openness about priorities and rationale reassures others that decisions are fair and informed. Without transparency, suspicion fills the void, undermining leadership. Another critical element of trust is competence. People follow leaders not only because of character, but also because they are capable. Competence demonstrates the ability to navigate complexity, make sound decisions, and deliver results. Leaders who lack skill or knowledge lose credibility quickly, even if their intentions are noble. Trust grows when leaders combine integrity with the ability to execute effectively. It is the intersection of ethics and competence that makes leadership persuasive. Empathy also plays a central role in trust building. Leaders who understand and acknowledge the feelings, concerns, and aspirations of others demonstrate that they value people as more than mere resources. Empathetic leaders listen actively, respond with consideration, and validate experiences. This relational sensitivity fosters loyalty, encourages engagement, and builds emotional bonds that withstand challenges. People trust leaders who make them feel seen and heard. Accountability is essential to maintain trust over time. Leaders must accept responsibility for both successes and failures. When things go wrong, blaming others or deflecting responsibility erodes credibility. Leaders who own mistakes, learn from them, and implement corrective actions demonstrate reliability and courage. Accountability signals that leadership is not about personal gain, but about stewardship and collective success. This reinforces confidence in leadership decisions and inspires others to take responsibility themselves. Trust is fragile and must be nurtured continuously. One act of dishonesty or inconsistency can undo months or years of credibility. Leaders must therefore guard trust vigilantly, aligning words with actions in every interaction. Small, repeated acts of integrity accumulate into a reputation that commands respect. Conversely, repeated compromises of trust, even for expedient gains, gradually undermine influence. Leadership requires constant vigilance of character. Delegation is another domain where trust is expressed and reinforced. Leaders who micromanage communicate a lack of confidence in their team, which weakens engagement and initiative. In contrast, leaders who delegate responsibility with clear expectations demonstrate faith in their team's capabilities. Delegation is a two-way street. It empowers others while testing the leader's confidence in their judgment. Successful delegation strengthens mutual trust and amplifies leadership impact. Trust also enables risk-taking. Teams are willing to innovate, experiment, and push boundaries when they trust that leaders support them, even if failure occurs. Without trust, individuals hide ideas, avoid challenges, and cling to the status quo. Trust creates psychological safety, the belief that one can act, speak, or fail without fear of unfair reprisal. This environment is essential for growth, creativity, and resilience. In contrast, distrust parodies leadership. Leaders who are suspected of dishonesty, favoritism, or incompetence face disengagement, resistance, and fragmentation. Teams lose motivation. Communication breaks down, and progress stalls. Once broken, trust is difficult to restore, making prevention more effective than repair. This demonstrates why trust is the cornerstone upon which all other leadership qualities rest. Trust is closely linked to credibility. Credibility arises when leaders consistently demonstrate integrity, competence, empathy, and accountability. It is reinforced through repeated, transparent, and ethical action. When credibility is established, influence expands naturally, and followers willingly commit to shared objectives. Leadership without credibility is influence without substance, a fragile, short-lived phenomena. Building trust also requires alignment between individual and collective interests. Leaders who prioritize the common good over personal gain earn respect and loyalty. Self-serving actions, even when effective in the short term, weaken long-term influence. Trust is sustained when followers perceive that leaders act for shared benefit rather than personal advancement. Leadership, therefore, is inseparable from ethical stewardship. Moreover, trust enables leaders to manage conflict effectively. Teams face disagreements, tension, and competing priorities. Leaders who have established trust can intervene constructively, mediate disputes, and maintain cohesion. Without trust, conflict escalates, and authority alone cannot restore harmony. Trust creates a relational foundation that allows difficult conversations to occur productively. Mentorship is another area where trust plays a critical role. Leaders who invest in developing others demonstrate commitment to collective growth. When followers trust that leaders are genuinely invested in their development, they respond with loyalty, effort, and openness. Mentorship strengthens both individual capability and organizational resilience, reinforcing the leader's long-term influence. Importantly, trust is reciprocal. Leaders must also trust their team members, allowing autonomy, creativity, and ownership. Suspicion, micromanagement, or control diminishes the ability of others to perform effectively. Reciprocal trust creates a network of accountability and shared responsibility, amplifying leadership impact and resilience. Ultimately, trust is the glue that binds all aspects of leadership together. Vision, purpose, communication, and self-leadership are ineffective without trust. People do not follow leaders solely because they are competent, articulate, or visionary. They follow leaders they believe in. Leaders whose integrity and intentions inspire confidence. Trust is earned through consistent, ethical, and empathetic action and must be nurtured continuously. This chapter reinforces a fundamental truth. Leadership that lacks trust cannot endure. Influence collapses without credibility. Vision loses momentum without confidence, and teams falter without reliability. Leaders who cultivate trust create a foundation that enables all other qualities, vision, communication, and ethical action, to translate into real-world impact. Trust transforms leadership from an abstract concept into a living, sustainable force. Chapter 6. Decision-making and responsibility. The weight of leadership. Leadership is defined not by ideas alone, but by the courage to act upon them. While vision, self-leadership, communication, and trust provide a foundation, the essence of leadership is revealed in decisions and the responsibility that accompanies them. Every choice a leader makes carries consequences, both visible and hidden. Decision-making is therefore not a simple task. It is the crucible in which leadership is tested and defined. The first principle of leadership: leaders must distinguish between what is urgent and what is important, between short-term gain and long-term impact. Without clarity, choices become reactive, inconsistent, or driven by pressure rather than principle. Clear decision-making aligns actions with vision and values, ensuring that leadership moves in the intended direction rather than drifting under circumstance. Information is a critical component of sound decisions, but leaders must balance analysis with action. Overanalysis, often called paralysis by analysis, delays outcomes, and creates uncertainty. Conversely, hasty decisions without sufficient information risk avoidable mistakes. Effective leaders gather relevant data, consult stakeholders when appropriate, and evaluate alternatives, but they do not allow indecision to replace leadership. Timely and informed action distinguishes a decisive leader from a hesitant one. Responsibility is inseparable from decision. Leaders cannot simply issue directives and distance themselves from outcomes. Every decision carries consequences for people, resources, and broader systems. Leaders who embrace responsibility do not deflect blame when results are unfavorable. Instead, they analyze what went wrong, learn from it, and adjust future actions. This ownership reinforces credibility and builds trust. Conversely, avoidance of responsibility erodes influence and demonstrates weakness. Ethical considerations must guide all leadership decisions. Choices may be legal or technically possible, but ethical leadership requires asking, "Is this right? Or does this serve the greater good?" History offers countless examples of leaders who achieved short-term success but caused long-term harm due to ethically flawed decisions. Effective leadership balances effectiveness with moral responsibility, ensuring that progress does not come at the expense of integrity or human dignity. Decision-making also demands courage. Leadership often involves choosing the path that is unpopular, uncomfortable, or uncertain. Followers may resist, peers may doubt, and outcomes may be unpredictable. Courageous leaders act, despite fear, guided by principle and foresight. Courage is not the absence of fear. It is the ability to act responsibly in the presence of it. This willingness to make tough choices under pressure separates true leaders from managers or observers. Another essential aspect of leadership decisions is inclusivity. While leaders are ultimately responsible, engaging relevant perspectives improves outcomes and enhances buy-in. Soliciting diverse input encourages creativity, identifies blind spots, and strengthens alignment. Leaders who listen and weigh feedback demonstrate humility without relinquishing authority. Inclusion in decision-making fosters shared responsibility and collective commitment, reinforcing both trust and performance. Decision-making also involves prioritization. Leaders face limited resources, time, energy, personnel, and must determine where to focus efforts. Prioritization requires understanding both immediate needs and strategic objectives. Leaders who excel at prioritization allocate attention effectively, ensuring that critical tasks advance the vision, while non-essential activities do not drain resources. Clear priorities reduce confusion, increase efficiency, and amplify impact. Communication is essential throughout the decision-making process. Choices are only effective if they are clearly understood and accepted by those responsible for implementation. Ambiguous instructions, hidden agendas, or lack of rationale undermine decisions and create resistance. Leaders who explain their reasoning, acknowledge potential challenges, and set clear expectations increase the likelihood of successful execution. Communication turns intention into action. Adaptability is a key quality for responsible decisions. Circumstances change, information evolves, and unexpected obstacles emerge. Effective leaders monitor outcomes, remain flexible, and adjust course as necessary. Adaptability does not mean indecision. It means responsiveness guided by principle. Leaders who adapt responsibly demonstrate resilience, reinforce trust, and maintain progress even under uncertainty. Decision-making is closely connected to accountability. Leaders must evaluate the results of their actions honestly. Success should be acknowledged and credited appropriately, while failures should be examined openly for lessons learned. Accountability transforms mistakes into growth opportunities, strengthens credibility, and cultivates a culture of responsibility within teams. A leader who evades accountability undermines both trust and authority. Delegation plays a role in responsible leadership decisions. Leaders cannot act on every detail personally, yet they remain accountable for outcomes. Effective delegation involves selecting capable individuals, clearly communicating expectations, and monitoring progress without micromanaging. By empowering others to act responsibly, leaders multiply their impact while reinforcing accountability across the organization. Decision-making also intersects with risk management. Every choice involves uncertainty. Leaders must weigh potential gains against potential losses. Risk-aware leaders do not avoid all uncertainty, they evaluate consequences, plan contingencies, and act decisively. Calculated risks often differentiate transformative leadership from routine administration. Courage, combined with preparation, ensures that risk is navigated rather than feared. Another important aspect is timing. A well-informed decision made too late can be as damaging as a poor decision made too early. Leaders must balance preparation with urgency, recognizing when sufficient information has been gathered and when action must be taken. Timing, like clarity and courage, is a skill developed through experience, reflection, and careful observation of context. Leadership decisions also require humility. Leaders must recognize the limits of their knowledge, acknowledge mistakes, and remain open to correction. Humility does not diminish authority. It strengthens credibility and encourages collaboration. Leaders who remain humble can make better decisions because they are willing to listen, adapt, and learn from others. The connection between decision-making and trust is crucial. Followers are more likely to commit when they believe decisions are made thoughtfully, ethically, and responsibly. Poor decisions without transparency or accountability erode trust, even if intentions were good. Conversely, consistent, principled, and courageous decisions reinforce confidence and loyalty, amplifying the leader's influence. In contrast, indecision or avoidance signaled weakness. Leaders who delay choices or pass responsibility to others without guidance generate confusion and stagnation. Teams become disengaged, momentum stalls, and opportunities are lost. Effective leadership requires balancing deliberation with decisiveness, a combination of thoughtfulness, courage, and accountability. Ultimately, decision-making defines leadership because it transforms vision into reality. Leaders may possess clarity, communication, and trust, but without decisions, action never occurs. Decisions embody responsibility. They affect lives, systems, and outcomes. Leaders are judged less by their ideas than by the consequences of their choices. The weight of leadership is carried in the ability to decide well, act ethically, and assume full responsibility for outcomes. This chapter reinforces a fundamental truth. Leadership is inseparable from decision-making and responsibility. Every choice a leader makes reflects character, values, and competence. Leaders who embrace responsibility, act with courage, communicate clearly, and remain accountable create enduring influence. Decisions are not isolated acts. They are the defining moments that turn vision into action and potential into impact. Chapter 7. Emotional Intelligence. The heart of leadership. Leadership is not just a matter of strategy, vision, or technical skill. It is profoundly human. Decisions, influence, trust, and communication are all filtered through emotions, both of the leader and those they guide. Emotional intelligence. The ability to recognize, understand, and manage emotions is, therefore, at the heart of effective leadership. Without it, even the most competent and visionary leaders struggle to inspire, motivate, or maintain cohesion. Emotional intelligence begins with leaders who understand their own emotions, triggers, and patterns respond intentionally rather than react impulsively. Self-awareness allows leaders to recognize when stress, frustration, or ego may be influencing decisions. This awareness is not about suppressing emotion. It is about observing, interpreting, and channeling it constructively. Leaders who master self-awareness create stability and model composure for others. Closely related to self-awareness is leaders often face high-pressure situations, conflicts, or criticism that can provoke defensive or reactive behavior. Those who fail to regulate their emotions risk eroding trust, escalating tension, and undermining credibility. In contrast, leaders who remain calm, patient, and deliberate maintain control over outcomes. Self-regulation allows for thoughtful responses rather than knee-jerk reactions. reinforcing authority without aggression. Empathy is another essential component of emotional intelligence. Leaders must understand not only their own emotions, but also the emotions of those they lead. Empathy enables leaders to perceive unspoken concerns, anticipate resistance, and respond in ways that acknowledge the feelings of others. Empathetic leadership builds trust, strengthens relationships, and encourages engagement. People are more likely to follow leaders who validate their experiences and demonstrate genuine concern. Social awareness expands empathy into situational understanding. Leaders must recognize cultural, organizational, and interpersonal dynamics that shape behavior. Awareness of group sentiment, morale, and underlying tensions allows leaders to intervene appropriately. Leaders who ignore social cues risk misjudging situations, making decisions that alienate followers or worsen conflicts. Social awareness ensures that leadership actions are relevant and responsive. Relationship management is the outward expression of emotional intelligence. Leaders must influence, guide, and collaborate effectively while maintaining trust and cohesion. This requires skill in communication, negotiation, conflict resolution, and motivation. Leaders with strong relationship management create environments where collaboration thrives. Resistance is minimized, and goals are achieved collectively. Leadership influence depends on these interpersonal dynamics as much as on formal authority. Emotional intelligence enhances decisions. Leaders who recognize emotional biases both in themselves and others can make more rational and ethical choices. High emotional intelligence prevents impulsive actions driven by anger, fear, or ego. It also allows leaders to anticipate reactions, manage resistance, and communicate decisions in ways that minimize disruption. Emotionally intelligent leaders integrate both rational analysis and human insight. Resilience is a product of emotional intelligence. Leadership inevitably involves setbacks, criticism, and unexpected challenges. Leaders who can regulate their emotions, maintain perspective, and draw strength from setbacks are better able to recover and persist. Emotional resilience not only sustains personal performance, but also reassures teams that difficulties are navigable. A leader's emotional steadiness sets the tone for collective endurance. Conflict management relies heavily on emotional intelligence. Conflicts are natural in any group, and how leaders handle them determines whether tension becomes productive or destructive. Emotionally intelligent leaders approach conflict with understanding, active listening, and a focus on solutions rather than blame. They manage emotions, both their own and others, to prevent escalation and promote collaboration. Effective conflict resolution strengthens trust, unity, and long-term engagement. Motivation, another critical aspect, is deeply connected to emotional intelligence. Leaders who understand what drives individuals can inspire effort, commitment, and creativity. Motivation is not one size fits. It requires recognizing personal goals, values, and emotional drivers. Leaders who connect organizational objectives to individual aspirations increase engagement and performance. Emotionally intelligent leaders influence behavior by appealing to meaning and purpose rather than coercion. Emotional intelligence also reinforces ethical leadership. Leaders aware of the impact of their emotions on decisions are more likely to act responsibly and fairly. Empathy ensures that ethical considerations extend beyond rules to human consequences. Leaders with high emotional intelligence understand that their actions affect trust, morale, and organizational culture. Ethical lapses are less likely when leaders integrate emotional insight with values-based decisions. Moreover, emotionally intelligent leaders model behavior that encourages development in others. Teams exposed to leaders who demonstrate empathy, resilience, and composure are more likely to adopt similar behaviors. Emotional intelligence propagates through the organization, shaping culture, communication, and collaboration. Leadership, therefore, extends beyond personal capability, multiplies through relational influence. Leaders lacking emotional intelligence often struggle despite competence or vision. They may make technically sound decisions, but if delivered insensitively, these decisions create resistance. They may inspire fear rather than trust, compliance rather than engagement. Poor emotional awareness can escalate conflicts, erode morale, and fractured teams. This contrast illustrates why emotional intelligence is not optional. It is central to sustaining effective leadership. Continuous development of emotional intelligence requires reflection and feedback. Leaders must seek honest assessments of their behavior, observe outcomes, and adjust approaches. Emotional intelligence is not innate. It can be learned, practiced, and refined over time. Leaders who invest in this growth enhance their capacity to influence, guide, and inspire. The intersection of emotional intelligence with previous leadership elements is evident. Self-Leadership Chapter 2 provides the foundation of self-awareness and regulation. Communication Chapter 4 relies on understanding and managing emotions to convey messages effectively. Trust Chapter 5 is reinforced through empathy, integrity, and relationship management. Decision-Making Chapter 6 benefits from emotional insight, ensuring choices are both rational and human. Emotional intelligence acts as the connective tissue linking all aspects of leadership. Ultimately, emotional intelligence transforms leadership from transactional to transformational. It shifts focus from directives and outcomes to relationships, motivation, and human dynamics. Leaders who integrate emotional intelligence create environments where people feel understood, supported, and inspired. Influence becomes genuine rather than coerced. Commitment emerges naturally, and performance flourishes sustainably. This chapter reinforces a fundamental truth. Leadership without emotional intelligence is incomplete. Intelligence, vision, and decision-making matter. But the human heart determines whether leadership endures. Leaders who master emotional awareness, regulation, empathy, and relationship management not only achieve goals, they cultivate loyalty, engagement, and resilience. Emotional intelligence is not a soft skill. It is the core of effective, lasting leadership. Chapter 8. Adaptability and change, leading through uncertainty. Leadership is most visible when circumstances are unpredictable, challenges are unexpected, and outcomes are uncertain. Vision, trust, emotional intelligence, and decision-making provide a strong foundation. But adaptability distinguishes leaders who endure from those who falter. In a world defined by rapid technological advances, shifting markets, and global interconnectivity, the ability to navigate change is not optional, it is essential. Adaptability transforms obstacles into opportunities and uncertainty into strategic advantage. Adaptability begins with mindset. Leaders who embrace change as an inherent aspect of life are less likely to resist new circumstances or cling rigidly to outdated methods. This mindset fosters flexibility, curiosity, and resilience. Conversely, leaders who resist change or fear uncertainty often create stagnation, anxiety, and disengagement within their teams. The adaptable leader perceives challenges as catalysts for growth, reframing problems into possibilities. Self-awareness, previously discussed, is central to adaptability. Leaders who understand their strengths, limitations, and biases can identify where change is necessary and where they must rely on others. Adaptable leaders recognize when habitual patterns hinder progress and are willing to adjust. They approach unfamiliar situations with humility and an openness to learning, acknowledging that leadership effectiveness depends on responsiveness rather than mere authority. Decision-making under uncertainty is a critical component of adaptability. Leaders often face incomplete information, conflicting priorities, and rapidly evolving circumstances. While analysis is important, over-reliance on certainty can paralyze action. Adaptable leaders balance informed judgment with timely action, recognizing that decisions may need adjustment as new data emerges. They are comfortable revising course when necessary, without compromising values or purpose. Resilience is deeply intertwined with adaptability. Change often brings setbacks, ambiguity, and resistance. Leaders who can recover from failures, maintain perspective, and sustain focus provide stability for their teams. Adaptable leaders model composure and persistence, demonstrating that challenges are surmountable and that uncertainty can be navigated strategically. Resilience inspires confidence and reinforces trust, which is essential for collective progress. Communication is critical in leading through change. Adaptable leaders articulate reasons for adjustments, outline new expectations, and acknowledge challenges openly. Effective communication reduces fear, builds alignment, and fosters engagement. Without clear messaging, change can provoke confusion, resistance, or disengagement. Leaders must bridge the gap between uncertainty and understanding, guiding their teams with clarity and empathy. Adaptability also involves innovation. Leaders who are flexible encourage experimentation, creative problem-solving, and the exploration of new ideas. Change requires not only response, but initiative, the ability to anticipate trends, identify opportunities, and implement improvements proactively. Adaptable leaders do not wait for problems to escalate. They seek solutions before crises occur, fostering a culture of continuous improvement. Empathy supports adaptability by allowing leaders to recognize the emotional impact of change on individuals and teams. Resistance is often emotional rather than rational. Understanding concerns and fears helps leaders guide transitions effectively. Leaders who demonstrate empathy during change maintain morale, strengthen relationships, and reinforce loyalty. People are more willing to embrace uncertainty when they feel heard, understood, and supported. Strategic vision is essential when navigating change. Adaptable leaders link adjustments to long-term goals, ensuring that short-term responses do not compromise overarching objectives. By maintaining alignment between immediate actions and broader vision, leaders prevent reactive decision-making from derailing progress. Change becomes purposeful rather than chaotic, reinforcing confidence in leadership direction. Adaptability also requires learning agility. Leaders must absorb lessons from both success and failure, applying insights to future situations. Those who cling to rigid methods or refuse to reflect on outcomes struggle to improve. Continuous learning equips leaders to anticipate emerging trends, refine strategies, and respond effectively to novel challenges. Learning agility ensures that adaptability is sustained rather than occasional. Risk management is closely tied to adaptability. Change inevitably involves uncertainty, and leaders must weigh potential outcomes, prepare contingencies, and act decisively. Adaptable leaders embrace calculated risks, understanding that stagnation is often more dangerous than controlled experimentation. They recognize that innovation, progress, and transformation demand a willingness to step beyond comfort zones. Cultural awareness is another aspect of adaptability. Leaders operate within complex social and organizational systems, each with its own norms, expectations, and dynamics. Effective change management requires sensitivity to these cultural factors. Leaders who fail to recognize these dynamics risk alienating stakeholders, provoking resistance, or undermining morale. Culturally aware leaders integrate diverse perspectives, ensuring that change is inclusive and sustainable. Adaptable leaders also inspire adaptability in others. By modeling flexibility, curiosity, and resilience, they encourage team members to embrace learning and innovation. They create environments where experimentation is supported, mistakes are treated as lessons, and initiative is rewarded. This cultural shift amplifies leadership effectiveness, as adaptability becomes a shared competency rather than the responsibility of a single individual. In contrast, inflexible leadership diminishes performance. Leaders who resist change, enforce rigid procedures, or punish innovation create stagnation and fear. Teams lose motivation, creativity declines, and opportunities are missed. Over time, inflexibility erodes trust and undermines credibility. Adaptability is therefore not a luxury. It is a defining characteristic of enduring leadership. Ethical considerations remain central in adaptable leadership. Flexibility must not compromise integrity. Leaders must ensure that changes respect values, uphold fairness, and prioritize collective well-being. Ethical adaptability balances responsiveness with principle, demonstrating that flexibility and accountability are complementary rather than conflicting. Decision-making, communication, resilience, and emotional intelligence discussed in previous chapters intersect with adaptability. Leaders must integrate insights from each domain to navigate change effectively. Emotional intelligence allows understanding of human reactions to change. Communication conveys rationale and expectations. Resilience sustains effort through uncertainty. Decision-making ensures timely and responsible action. Adaptability synthesizes these competencies, enabling leadership to thrive in dynamic environments. Ultimately, adaptability transforms leadership from static authority to dynamic influence. It enables leaders to navigate complexity, respond to uncertainty, and seize opportunities in turbulent conditions. Leaders who embrace change, balance flexibility with principle, and guide teams through uncertainty create resilience, innovation, and sustained progress. This chapter reinforces a fundamental truth. Leadership is not solely about controlling circumstances, it is about navigating them responsibly and effectively. Leaders who cultivate adaptability, resilience, learning agility, and empathy ensure that vision becomes reality even in the most uncertain environments. Change is inevitable. Effective leadership ensures that it becomes a vehicle for growth rather than a source of fear or disruption. Chapter 9. Collaboration and teamwork. Multiplying leadership. Impact leadership is not a solitary endeavor. No leader, regardless of vision, skill, or courage, can achieve meaningful impact alone. The ability to collaborate effectively and foster teamwork multiplies leadership influence, enabling groups to accomplish far more than individuals acting in isolation. Collaboration transforms leadership from a personal capability into a collective force, amplifying results and creating sustainable change. The foundation of collaboration is trust. Previously discussed in Chapter 5, teams operate effectively when members trust the leader and one another. Trust ensures open communication, reduces fear of failure, and encourages sharing of ideas. Without trust, collaboration is superficial. Decisions are questioned, and collective potential remains unrealized. Leaders must actively cultivate an environment where trust is established and maintained through consistency, integrity, and accountability. Clear communication is equally critical. Leaders must articulate goals, expectations, and roles unambiguously, ensuring that all team members understand their contributions to the broader vision. Ambiguity or conflicting directives generate confusion, inefficiency, and frustration. Effective leaders use clarity to bridge individual efforts with organizational objectives, creating alignment that fosters coordinated action. Communication and collaboration is both top-down and lateral. Leaders must listen actively to team input while providing direction. Empathy and emotional intelligence, explored in Chapter 7, are essential for effective teamwork. Leaders must understand diverse perspectives, recognize emotions, and respond constructively. Teams consist of individuals with varying backgrounds, motivations, and emotional states. Leaders who are attuned to these dynamics can mediate conflicts, support engagement, and build cohesion. Emotional intelligence allows leaders to harness the collective strengths of their team rather than being undermined by interpersonal friction. Delegation is another pillar of collaborative leadership. Leaders cannot control every task or decision. They must empower capable individuals to act responsibly. Effective delegation distributes authority, encourages initiative, and develops skills within the team. Leaders who delegate effectively balance autonomy with accountability, providing guidance without micromanaging. Delegation not only increases efficiency but also fosters trust, ownership, and professional growth. Diversity strengthens collaboration when leveraged effectively. Teams composed of individuals with different expertise, experiences, and viewpoints offer richer problem-solving capabilities and greater innovation potential. Leaders must recognize, value, and integrate diverse perspectives to achieve optimal results. Diversity, however, requires careful management. Differences must be respected, communication facilitated, and shared objectives emphasized to prevent conflict and fragmentation. Conflict management is integral to collaboration. Differences in opinion, priorities, or approaches are inevitable in any group. Leaders must address conflicts promptly, fairly, and constructively. Avoiding or mishandling conflict can erode trust, hinder decision-making, and reduce cohesion. Leaders who approach conflict with empathy, clarity, and problem-solving focused strengthen team resilience and maintain productive collaboration. Shared purpose enhances teamwork. When team members understand how their contributions align with a larger vision, motivation and engagement increase. Purpose creates alignment, ensuring that efforts are coordinated toward common objectives rather than fragmented by individual agendas. Leaders who articulate the significance of collaborative work inspire commitment, reduce resistance, and promote collective accountability. Adaptability, discussed in Chapter 8, is also crucial in collaboration. Teams must adjust strategies, processes, and roles in response to changing circumstances. Leaders who model flexibility encourage similar behaviors in their teams. Collaborative environments thrive when members feel empowered to innovate, suggest improvements, and adjust actions without fear of reprisal. Adaptability in collaboration ensures that the team remains agile, resilient, and effective. Recognition and feedback foster collaboration. Leaders who acknowledge individual contributions and provide constructive guidance strengthen engagement and morale. Feedback promotes learning, reinforces desired behaviors, and encourages continuous improvement. Recognition signals value, increases motivation, and solidifies loyalty. Teams that feel seen and appreciated are more willing to cooperate, share knowledge, and support one another. Decision-making in a collaborative context requires balancing authority and input. Leaders retain ultimate responsibility but benefit from collective intelligence. Engaging team members in decision-making improves outcomes, increases buy-in, and distributes ownership. Effective leaders facilitate inclusive discussion, weigh diverse perspectives, and make timely decisions that integrate input without sacrificing accountability. Collaboration thus becomes a force multiplier rather than a source of indecision. Leadership in collaboration also involves cultivating a culture of psychological safety. Teams perform best when members feel free to express ideas, take risks, and admit mistakes without fear of ridicule or punishment. Leaders create this environment by modeling openness, encouraging experimentation, and responding constructively to errors. Psychological safety promotes innovation, learning, and resilience, allowing collaborative efforts to reach their full potential. Ethical leadership is intertwined with collaboration. Leaders must ensure fairness, transparency, and respect in interactions, recognizing that misuse of power or favoritism undermines teamwork. Ethical conduct builds trust, reinforces credibility, and sets behavioral norms for the team. Collaboration guided by ethics ensures that collective efforts serve shared objectives rather than individual agendas. Mentorship enhances collaborative leadership. Leaders who invest in the development of team members cultivate future leaders, strengthen capacity, and reinforce engagement. Mentorship encourages knowledge sharing, skill development, and professional growth. Teams guided by leaders who mentor collaboratively develop cohesion, loyalty, and resilience, creating a sustainable cycle of leadership growth. Measurement and accountability support collaboration. Clear metrics, defined responsibilities, and regular assessment enable teams to track progress, identify areas for improvement, and celebrate achievements. Accountability ensures that individual and collective efforts align with objectives, reinforcing motivation and reducing friction. Leaders who integrate structure with collaboration maximize effectiveness without stifling creativity. Ultimately, collaboration magnifies leadership impact. A leader working in isolation may accomplish certain objectives, but a cohesive, empowered team can achieve far greater outcomes. Leadership multiplied through teamwork combines vision, trust, emotional intelligence, decision-making, adaptability, and ethical guidance into collective action. The result is sustainable influence, innovation, and success that extends beyond any single individual. In contrast, leaders who fail to foster collaboration limit potential. Teams fragmented by mistrust, poor communication, or lack of alignment struggle to execute even simple tasks. Talent, vision, and effort are squandered when collaboration is weak. This underscores the essential truth. Leadership effectiveness is measured not by what a leader does alone, but by what their team accomplishes together. This chapter reinforces a central principle. Leadership is amplified through collaboration. Trust, communication, empathy, adaptability, and accountability converge to transform individual capability into collective achievement. Leaders who cultivate teamwork create resilient, innovative, and purpose-driven organizations capable of achieving extraordinary results. Collaboration is not optional. It is the multiplier that transforms vision into reality and influence into impact. Chapter 10. Visionary Leadership, Shaping the Future. Leadership is ultimately about more than managing the present. It is about shaping the future. Visionary leadership builds on the foundations of self-leadership, communication, trust, decision, emotional intelligence, adaptability, and collaboration explored in previous chapters. A visionary leader sees possibilities before they exist, inspires others to believe in those possibilities, and mobilizes collective effort to turn them into reality. Visionary leadership transforms organizations, communities, and even societies. At its core, visionary leadership begins with foresight. Leaders must anticipate trends, challenges, and opportunities that lie ahead. They scan the environment, study emerging patterns, and think strategically about long-term outcomes. Foresight is not about predicting every detail. It is about perceiving possibilities, preparing for contingencies, and envisioning a future that aligns with values and purpose. A leader who cannot anticipate change is constantly reacting rather than creating direction. Vision is more than imagination. It is actionable inspiration. Visionary leaders articulate a clear, compelling picture of what the future could be. This vision communicates purpose and sets the stage for collective effort. People are drawn to leaders who provide clarity in uncertainty, who frame challenges as opportunities, and who describe outcomes that are both ambitious and attainable. Vision inspires commitment and aligns efforts toward meaningful goals. Communication is the vehicle through which vision becomes shared reality. A visionary leader conveys ideas compellingly, ensuring that others understand not only what the vision is, but why it matters and how it can be achieved. Effective communication translates abstract possibilities into concrete steps, connects individual roles to overarching objectives, and motivates collective action. Without communication, vision remains personal and powerless. With it, vision mobilizes engagement and innovation. Trust underpins the acceptance of vision. People are unlikely to follow ideas they do not trust or leaders they do not believe in. Leaders who have demonstrated integrity, competence, and accountability cultivate trust that makes visionary leadership possible. Trust allows followers to commit to long-term objectives, embrace risk, and invest effort even when immediate results are uncertain. Without trust, vision falters, no matter how compelling. Emotional intelligence plays a vital role in translating vision into action. Visionary leaders understand the emotional impact of their vision, anticipate resistance, and empathize with concerns. They inspire confidence, manage fear, and cultivate enthusiasm. Emotional intelligence enables leaders to connect vision to human motivation, ensuring that people see personal and collective value in pursuing the envisioned future. Decision-making in visionary leadership balances ambition with pragmatism. Leaders must weigh possibilities against constraints, prioritize initiatives, and commit resources effectively. Bold decisions are necessary to implement vision, yet they must be grounded in ethics, evidence, and strategic consideration. Visionary leadership is not reckless. It is disciplined ambition, guided by principle and informed judgment. Adaptability is critical to sustaining vision. Even the most compelling future is subject to unforeseen changes, obstacles, and evolving circumstances. Visionary leaders remain flexible, adjusting strategies without compromising core purpose. They see change not as a threat to vision, but as a necessary refinement to achieve it. Adaptable vision maintains momentum and relevance in a dynamic environment. Collaboration magnifies the power of vision. No leader achieves transformation alone. Collective effort is required to convert possibilities into reality. Visionary leaders empower others to contribute ideas, skills, and energy, fostering shared ownership of outcomes. Collaboration enables scaling of vision, turning individual insight into systemic impact. The combination of personal foresight and collective action defines transformative leadership. Innovation is an essential companion to visionary leadership. Leaders must challenge assumptions, experiment with new approaches, and encourage creative Innovation bridges the gap between the present and the envisioned future, providing practical methods to achieve ambitious goals. Visionary leaders do not rely solely on existing methods. They inspire continuous improvement and exploration of uncharted paths. Ethical leadership grounds vision in responsibility. Ambition without ethical considerations risks harm, exploitation, or unsustainable practices. Visionary leaders ensure that the pursuit of the future benefits all stakeholders and aligns with moral principles. Ethical grounding reinforces credibility, sustains trust, and ensures that the vision endures beyond short-term success. Resilience strengthens visionary leadership. Long-term transformation involves setbacks, failures, and opposition. Leaders who persist, learn from mistakes, and maintain focus on ultimate objectives demonstrate resilience that inspires confidence. Resilient visionary leaders model perseverance, signaling that challenges are part of the process rather than signs of defeat. A visionary leader also cultivates culture. Organizational values, norms, and behaviors must align with the envisioned future. Leaders shape culture through actions, communication, and reinforcement of shared principles. Culture becomes a multiplier for vision, embedding the purpose, innovation, and collaboration necessary for sustainable impact. Mentorship ensures continuity of visionary leadership. Leaders who develop others ensure that their vision is understood, internalized, and carried forward. By mentoring emerging leaders, they create a succession of capability, enabling long-term influence and systemic transformation. Vision is not static. It evolves through shared understanding, leadership development, and collective commitment. Measurement and accountability convert vision into tangible progress. Leaders must establish metrics, track outcomes, and evaluate effectiveness. Monitoring progress allows adjustment, ensures alignment, and sustains momentum. Accountability reinforces the seriousness of vision and instills a sense of responsibility in the team. Measured progress transforms abstract possibilities into observable achievements. In contrast, lack of vision leads to stagnation. Without foresight, leaders react to circumstances rather than shaping them. Without inspiration, followers become disengaged, compliant rather than committed. Without shared purpose, collective energy dissipates. Visionary leadership provides direction, motivation, and coherence that turns potential into performance. Ultimately, visionary leadership integrates all elements of effective leadership explored in earlier chapters. Self-leadership Chapter 2 provides clarity and discipline. Communication Chapter 4 conveys meaning. Trust Chapter 5 enables followership. Decision-making Chapter 6 translates intention into action. Emotional Intelligence Chapter 7 motivates and connects. Adaptability Chapter 8 navigates uncertainty. Collaboration Chapter 9 multiplies effort. Visionary leadership synthesizes these dimensions, directing them toward a purposeful, impactful, and sustainable future. This chapter reinforces a fundamental truth. Leadership is not merely about managing what exists, it is about creating what could be. Visionary leaders transform possibility into reality, inspire commitment, and mobilize collective effort toward meaningful outcomes. Vision without execution is fantasy. Execution without vision is directionless. True leadership harmonizes both, guiding people toward a future that is both ambitious and achievable. Chapter 11. Ethical Leadership. Doing the right thing. Leadership is measured not only by achievements, influence, or vision, but by the moral compass guiding decisions and actions. Ethical leadership ensures that authority is exercised responsibly, influence is wielded justly, and power serves the collective good rather than personal ambition. In a world filled with complex challenges, competing interests, and high stakes, ethics is the foundation that sustains trust, credibility, and long-term impact. At its core, ethical leadership begins with integrity. Integrity is the alignment between words, actions, and values. Leaders who consistently act in accordance with principles earn respect and legitimacy. Integrity is demonstrated not only in visible actions, but in private decisions, especially when choices are difficult or inconvenient. Leaders who compromise integrity for expediency weaken trust, diminish influence, and erode organizational culture. Transparency complements integrity Ethical leaders communicate decisions, reasoning, and constraints openly, without deception or manipulation. Transparency fosters trust by reducing uncertainty and enabling others to understand the context behind decisions. Leaders who withhold information, mislead, or obscure motives compromise credibility, creating suspicion and resistance. Ethical transparency ensures that followers can engage confidently and responsibly. Fairness is another hallmark of ethical leadership. Leaders must treat individuals equitably, uphold justice, and avoid favoritism or discrimination. Fairness strengthens cohesion, loyalty, and motivation within teams. It also reinforces the principle that authority is exercised in service of collective goals rather than personal gain. Leaders who prioritize fairness create environments where people feel valued, respected, and empowered to contribute fully. Accountability is essential to ethics. Leaders must accept responsibility for both successes and failures, modeling ownership rather than blame shifting. Ethical accountability encourages learning, reinforces credibility, and cultivates trust. By acknowledging mistakes and implementing corrective actions, leaders demonstrate commitment to principles rather than image, reinforcing the moral foundation of leadership. Decision-making in ethical leadership balances ambition with responsibility. Leaders face choices that often involve competing priorities, risks, and consequences. Ethical leaders evaluate options through the lens of values, considering the impact on individuals, communities, and the organization as a whole. Decisions are guided by principle, not solely by efficiency, profit, or convenience. This ensures that leadership advances sustainable and just outcomes. Empathy, previously discussed in Chapter 7, supports ethical leadership by fostering understanding of how decisions affect others. Leaders who consider the perspectives, feelings, and well-being of stakeholders make choices that are humane, fair, and socially responsible. Empathy ensures that ethics is not abstract or theoretical, but grounded in real-world impact, protecting people from harm and encouraging engagement. Ethical leadership also requires courage. Leaders often face pressure to cut corners, prioritize self-interest, or compromise values. Ethical courage is the ability to resist such pressures, make principled choices, and maintain accountability, even when unpopular or risky. Courage reinforces credibility and signals to followers that values are non-negotiable, strengthening trust and commitment. Consistency is critical in ethical leadership. Leaders who selectively apply principles or adjust ethics based on convenience undermine credibility. Ethical consistency demonstrates reliability and reinforces the cultural norms of fairness, integrity, and responsibility. People are more likely to follow leaders whose ethical standards are unwavering, particularly during challenging circumstances. Cultural awareness enhances ethical leadership by ensuring that decisions respect diversity and contextual norms. Leaders must navigate varying values, expectations, and societal standards, balancing organizational principles with local or cultural realities. Ethical leaders avoid imposing rigid frameworks indiscriminately, instead adapting principles thoughtfully while preserving integrity. Ethical leadership shapes organizational culture. Leaders set the tone through behavior, communication, and reinforcement of values. Ethical norms are transmitted by modeling, policies, and recognition of principled behavior. Organizations led ethically cultivate trust, collaboration, and engagement, while unethical leadership fosters fear, disengagement, and dysfunction. Leadership is therefore both personal and systemic in its ethical impact. Mentorship amplifies ethical leadership. Leaders who guide, advise, and model principled behavior for emerging leaders instill a culture of integrity, responsibility, and fairness. Mentorship ensures that ethics is not an individual trait, but a shared standard, sustaining long-term organizational resilience and societal impact. Ethical leadership propagates through the organization, influencing behavior and decisions beyond the leader's direct actions. Ethical dilemmas test leadership consistently. Situations rarely offer clear-cut solutions. Conflicting interests, incomplete information, and high stakes complicate choices. Ethical leaders navigate these dilemmas through principled reasoning, consultation, and reflection. They prioritize long-term impact and collective well-being over immediate gains or personal advantage. Effective ethical leadership acknowledges complexity while maintaining unwavering commitment to core values. Integration with other leadership dimensions is essential. Communication Chapter 4 conveys ethical reasoning clearly and convincingly. Trust Chapter 5 ensures followers believe in the leader's commitment to ethics. Decision-making Chapter 6 applies ethical principles in practice. Emotional intelligence Chapter 7 guides understanding of impact on people. Adaptability Chapter 8 balances responsiveness with moral standards. Collaboration Chapter 9 ensures that ethics extends to team dynamics. Visionary Leadership Chapter 10 aligns long-term goals with ethical responsibility. Ethics unifies all these elements, providing coherence and legitimacy to leadership. Ethical leadership is not synonymous with perfection. Mistakes and misjudgments occur. What matters is the commitment to values, the willingness to acknowledge errors, and the consistent effort to act responsibly. Leaders who embody ethics cultivate environments where principled action is recognized, reinforced, and replicated. Mistakes become opportunities for learning, not excuses for moral compromise. Ultimately, ethical leadership determines whether leadership is sustainable or fleeting. Influence without ethics may achieve short-term results, but risks long-term damage, eroding trust, credibility, and cohesion. Ethical leaders build enduring organizations, inspire loyalty, and guide others toward meaningful, responsible, and impactful action. Ethics transforms leadership from authority into stewardship, from control into service. This chapter reinforces a fundamental truth. Leadership is only as strong as the moral foundation upon which it is built. Integrity, transparency, fairness, accountability, empathy, courage, and consistency are not optional. Traits they are essential to lasting influence. Leaders who prioritize ethics ensure that every action, decision, and vision serves a greater purpose, creating not only effective leadership, but also a legacy of trust, respect, and positive impact. If you want, I can continue with Chapter 12, 1500 words, next, completing the final chapter and bringing all prior themes together for a strong conclusion. Chapter 12. Integration and Transformation, Leadership in Practice. Leadership is not merely a collection of skills, principles, or concepts. It is a living practice that integrates vision, trust, emotional intelligence. In this final chapter, we examine how all elements of leadership converge to create transformation, both for the leader and those they guide. Leadership, when fully realized, reshapes organizations, influences communities, and leaves lasting impact on individuals and systems alike. Integration begins with self-leadership. The foundation of effective leadership, as explored in Chapter 2, is mastery over one's own thoughts, emotions, and actions. Leaders who can regulate impulses, maintain clarity of purpose, and exercise disciplined decision-making serve as stable anchors for others. Self-leadership is not static, it evolves with experience, reflection, and continuous learning. Leaders who invest in themselves cultivate resilience, awareness, and adaptability, forming the cornerstone upon which all other leadership capacities are built. Vision transforms potential into direction. Chapter 10 highlighted the importance of foresight and strategic imagination. Integrated leadership links personal clarity to collective purpose, enabling leaders to articulate an inspiring picture of the future while guiding tangible steps toward achieving it. Vision acts as a compass, aligning actions, decisions, and behaviors across individuals and teams. Without vision, even the most capable leaders may act effectively yet fail to achieve meaningful outcomes. Trust, discussed in Chapter 5, is the glue that binds leadership practice. Integration requires that leaders earn and sustain trust through integrity, accountability, transparency, and fairness. Trust enables influence, facilitates collaboration, and encourages innovation. When integrated with vision, trust ensures that teams commit fully, engage meaningfully, and align their efforts with collective objectives. A leader who lacks trust may have knowledge and skill, but their impact remains limited and transient. Emotional intelligence, from Chapter 7, provides the relational and interpersonal dimension of leadership. Self-awareness, self-regulation, empathy, and relationship management allow leaders to navigate complex human dynamics effectively. Integration ensures that vision, decision-making, and ethical principles are executed in ways that resonate with people, fostering engagement, motivation, and loyalty. Leadership without emotional intelligence risks alienation, resistance, and fragmentation. Decision-making, highlighted in Chapter 6, is the operational expression of leadership. Integrated leadership ensures that every choice reflects alignment with vision, trust, ethical standards, and strategic priorities. Leaders must balance analysis with action, risk with opportunity, and short-term demands with long-term objectives. Decision-making becomes transformative when it consistently translates abstract principles into tangible outcomes, demonstrating the practical power of integrated leadership. Adaptability, examined in Chapter 8, allows leaders to navigate uncertainty without compromising integrity or purpose. Integrated leadership responds to change strategically, preserving core principles while adjusting methods and tactics. Adaptability ensures that vision remains relevant, decisions remain effective, and teams remain resilient, even in volatile or ambiguous environments. Leaders who integrate adaptability into practice transform challenges into opportunities for growth and innovation, collaboration, and teamwork. Discussed in Chapter 9, Magnify Leadership Impact. Integration recognizes that leadership is not a solo endeavor. It is amplified when diverse talents, skills, and perspectives are mobilized toward shared objectives. Effective leaders cultivate cohesion, distribute authority responsibly, and create inclusive environments where ideas flow freely. Collaboration ensures that transformation is collective, scalable, and sustainable. Ethical leadership, from Chapter 11, grounds all actions in principle. Integration of ethics ensures that influence is exercised responsibly, decisions serve the greater good, and progress is achieved without compromising values. Leaders who fail to integrate ethical considerations risk short-term success but long-term collapse. Ethical leadership ensures that transformation is constructive, equitable, and enduring, leaving a legacy of trust, respect, and positive impact. Practical integration also involves feedback, reflection, and continuous learning. Leaders must evaluate outcomes, solicit input, and adjust strategies based on experience. Reflection bridges theory and practice, allowing leaders to refine skills, deepen insight, and align actions with evolving circumstances. Leadership is not static. It is a dynamic process of adaptation, learning, and transformation. Continuous reflection ensures that integration is deliberate rather than accidental. Mentorship and development of others extend the transformative effect of leadership. Leaders who cultivate capability, autonomy, and ethical standards in those they guide create systems of influence that outlast individual tenure. Integration involves transferring knowledge, modeling behavior, and fostering growth within teams. By developing future leaders, current leadership becomes both sustainable and exponentially impactful, reinforcing organizational and societal resilience. Integration also manifests in cultural and systemic change. Leaders shape norms, behaviors, and organizational climate through example, communication, and reinforcement of shared principles. When leadership is fully integrated, it aligns structures, processes, and values to support the vision, ethical standards, and collective objectives. Transformation becomes embedded, influencing not only immediate outcomes, but the long-term trajectory of institutions and communities. Transformation is the ultimate goal of integrated leadership. It encompasses personal growth, team effectiveness, organizational innovation, and societal contribution. Leaders who integrate all dimensions: self-mastery, vision, trust, emotional intelligence, decision-making, adaptability, collaboration, and ethics create environments where individuals thrive, collective potential is realized, and lasting impact is achieved. Transformation is not a single event, but a continuous process of alignment, learning, and action. Challenges in integration are inevitable. Conflicting priorities, competing interests, and unforeseen obstacles test the coherence of leadership. Effective leaders navigate these tensions by maintaining clarity of purpose, ethical grounding, and commitment to collective well-being. Integration requires courage to act consistently under pressure, humility to adjust when necessary, and wisdom to balance competing demands. Leaders who persevere through complexity demonstrate the transformative power of fully integrated leadership. The ripple effect of integrated leadership is profound. Individuals inspired by ethical, emotionally intelligent, and visionary leadership become empowered, motivated, and capable of leading themselves. Teams achieve cohesion, innovation, and resilience. Organizations evolve in ways that align with long-term objectives and ethical principles. Communities benefit from responsible stewardship and principled decision. The integration of leadership elements multiplies influence beyond the leader's immediate reach. Ultimately, integrated leadership is both art and science. It requires knowledge, skill, and strategy, but also intuition, empathy, and moral clarity. Leaders must synthesize diverse competencies into coherent action, harmonizing individual strengths with collective effort. Integration ensures that leadership is not fragmented, reactive, or superficial, but strategic, principled, and transformative. This chapter reinforces a fundamental truth. Leadership is most powerful when fully integrated. The principles explored throughout this book: self-leadership, communication, trust, decision, emotional intelligence, adaptability, collaboration, visionary thinking, and ethics are not isolated skills. They are interdependent. True leadership occurs when these dimensions are woven into consistent, intentional, and principled practice. Integration transforms potential into performance, ideas into action, and influence into enduring impact. As readers reflect on these lessons, the call to action is clear. Cultivate leadership in all its dimensions. Invest in self-mastery. Communicate with clarity. Build trust. Make responsible decisions. Understand and manage emotions. Adapt to change. Foster collaboration. Envision the future. And act ethically. Leadership is not a position or title. It is practice, influence, and responsibility. Integrated leadership creates transformation, leaving a legacy that extends far beyond individual accomplishments, shaping lives, organizations, and the world for the better. This completes the 12-chapter leadership series, each chapter approximately 1,500 words, with seamless integration of the concepts of self-leadership, trust, communication, decision, emotional intelligence, adaptability, collaboration, vision, and ethics.